Argentina is battling an economic crisis with inflation.
¿Qué pasa con este dólar cuando vos no lo tenés? Primero que si te quedás sin reservas te vas a una hiper.
Este no es un sistema precisamente de justicia social y tiene que ver con una inconsistencia central que es la destrucción de la moneda.
Es decir, lo que no habla en la casa lo habla en la calle, ¿viste? Te pones a hablar y qué sé yo. Y es gracioso porque a veces vos, de un presidente, y después el otro te sube, y otro pasajero y te habla totalmente de lo contrario de lo del otro.
Andres has been a taxi driver in the city of Buenos Aires for 25 years. He says he tries to avoid being an amateur psychologist for his passengers, but does have an insight into the mood of people in the Argentine capital.
Y la gente está muy desilusionada, sí, muy desilusionada. No cree en nada.
Polarized politics and rampant inflation have come to define daily life in Argentina.
Si vos no tenés plata, el humor de la gente cambia. La diferencia se ve a la legua por el tema de cuando vos yo voy a cargar gas o voy a cargar nafta, ahí ya se te das cuenta, la inflación, todo. Un litro de leche antes salía 200 pesos y ahora te sale 500.
Andres is old enough to remember when the country battled with hyperinflation 3 decades ago.
Que nosotros vivimos de la inflación todo el tiempo tuvimos un problema de inflación. Todo el tiempo, entonces uno ya se acostumbró a estas cosas. ¿En cuántos años? Un montón de años.
Inflation is nothing new in Argentina, yet in the past decade, under both left and right-wing governments, the rate of inflation has accelerated.
If you look at the price of Argentina from, 2005 till now, you had like 20% inflation in 2010, then you had 40%, then you had 60, 80, and we are always in upper levels of inflation.
Earlier this year, the rate of inflation in Argentina reached 100%. The price of goods is doubling in the space of just 12 months. It's the highest inflation rate this country has seen in 3 decades.
Inflation may be continuing to ease right here.
Inflation was 7.9% in June.
A 1984 para encontrar una inflación tan alta como la que precios vuelve a rozar.
The impact of the pandemic and the conflict in Ukraine caused inflation to spike around the world. But with the exception of Venezuela, Argentina is the outlier in South America, with one of the highest inflation rates in the world.
First, when you compare the levels of inflation, it really stands out Argentina. Leaving aside, as you said, Venezuela, that has other different political problems, Brazil, Chile, Peru, Paraguay, Colombia, all countries have inflations around 10% annually or less. Maybe now after the pandemic, they just rose a little bit, but they are nowhere near the levels of Argentina that nowadays we have more than 100%, 115%.
Official government figures released in July showed monthly inflation had slowed, but the year-on-year inflation remains at 115%. The latest report shows the price of bread or flour more than doubling in the space of a year. And inflation is felt across the country, in all sectors of the economy, by all sectors of society.
You have to live in the day. You can think next year. I've been traveling last month, and when I return, all the cost, it's like it's double. It's impossible.
Paulina Gomez says she is in a privileged position. She's a film sales agent. She works with companies abroad and earns well, but she has no prospect of buying her own property, and her landlord raises the rent every few months.
It was like ridiculous. It depends on it was a 30%. Sometimes he wants me to change like a 80%. And I said, this is ridiculous. And I have this because I said, well, I want to move to other apartment. But in the neighborhood that I live, all the rents are in dollars and are much higher. In my same floor, The rent of the other apartment is for foreigner people, and it's like 4 times more expensive, 5 than my apartment.
The cost of living has spiked as inflation accelerates, and wage increases have not matched rising prices.
Bueno, acá tengo una conversación que, bueno, la viste recién.
Ignacio Ini is part of a tenants' lobby group. They organised after seeing the difficulties facing thousands of people looking to rent. Ignacio himself is hoping to move apartments soon, and he shows us some of the demands landlords make.
Tener ingresos comprobables en blanco de mínimo 500.000 pesos.
He reads out other requirements listed in the advert, but focuses on the cost.
I work 45 hours a week, 9 hours per day. And my salary is 180 pesos.
180,000 pesos, yeah.
So, it's less than the half of that.
One of the clauses in the advert includes regular increases in the rent.
It increases faster, the rent increases faster than my wage. So it's impossible.
At this organisation, they say they are seeing many examples of landlords making unreasonable demands on tenants, such as even refusing to rent to families with a young baby.
The owners prefer to rent the apartment for Airbnb than do it for local people, because tourists pay in dollars and we pay with pesos, and that's a problem because there are more apartments able to the tourists than apartments able for us, for people living here in Buenos Aires.
Hay ganadores y perdedores de este ritmo inflacionario y por ahora los ganadores y los perdedores siguen siendo los mismos.
A growing housing crisis for the middle class, but for the sector of society with little to no secure income, the crisis is not about affording rent, but about affording to eat.
Bueno, hoy tenemos una Argentina que duele muchísimo, una Argentina que tiene mucha pobreza, que tiene mucha indigencia, que tiene una inflación galopante de todos los días. El 99% de la población en la Argentina la está pasando mal y el 1% está re bien. Hay una realidad bastante cruda, bastante dolorosa.
As poverty levels rise, every day this soup kitchen ensures hundreds of people get at least a plate of food. Dina Sanchez says they see more and more people coming for help. This is a country with a recent history of economic crises. The late 1980s and early 1990s saw hyperinflation. The economic and political crash of 2001 brought to an end an economic system that pegged one Argentine peso to $1. And in the space of just 10 days, there were 5 presidents. Yet even with triple-digit inflation, social leaders say the current situation is very different to 2 decades ago.
Si comparamos, la crisis del 2001 fue de las crisis recientes que más impactaron en el subconsciente argentino, digamos, es algo que sigue dando, es un miedo que sigue dando vuelta. La diferencia en 2001 con la actualidad en términos de ingresos de la familia es que no había tanta ayuda económica como existe hoy para varios sectores.
Activist Nicolas Caropresi says social programs such as child benefit, employment schemes and access to food are what keeps a country with such high levels of poverty from boiling over.
Son políticas que, aunque muchos quieran suprimirlas, esas hoy mantienen a la sociedad más o menos organizada, digamos, y no explota de la manera que había explotado.
Despite social programs, major protests are a part of daily life in Buenos Aires as inflation hits lower income sectors the hardest. So why does Argentina have such high inflation? The economist Juan Manuel Telechea recently published a book that investigates the phenomenon of inflation in his country.
When you look in the last 10-15 years, we have like a really particular pattern of high inflation that combines with devaluations of the exchange rate. So as the exchange rate devaluates, that also puts pressure on costs on the firms. So that you raise prices again, you have a higher inflation.
He says Argentina is unique for the number of devaluations of the local currency.
We had 5 different exchange rate devaluations that were superior than 20%, and any other country in the region didn't have that. Well, and it's something unique of Argentina, and it's what causes all this system that tends to provoke an inflation that is higher every year. This is what I call the memory of inflation, that when you have this combined with fiscal problems and external problems, makes these vicious cycles that you have inflation every year in an upper level.
The spectre of inflation has an impact on society. Psychologist Alicia Stolkina was starting her teaching career when Argentina was in the throes of hyperinflation.
We couldn't thought. We were so, ¿cómo se dice? Absorbed for the situation, because you never knew in these days how much money you will have in 3 days. And then we decided to change the program, the teacher program, and we decided to make a workshop with the students about economy and mental health.
Stolkina is troubled by what she sees today.
Because it's not only the inflation, the economy, is the war, is the uncertainty about the future for the world, is the climate problem, the crisis of mental health service demand in this period. I never saw something like that.
Es la locura de la economía argentina.
Sí, tal cual.
La locura de no entender cuál es el dólar real.
Argentina's economy is complicated by capital controls introduced to preserve the central bank's foreign reserves. There is more than one exchange rate. In fact, there are many. There is the official peso to dollar rate of exchange. There are exchange rates for Argentines who use a credit card abroad, or even a different rate for agricultural exports. There are also parallel markets for the dollar, some of which are legal, some of which are not. The economic and political mood is often set by the price of the black market dollar, which, in Argentina, is called el dólar blue, the blue dollar. This complex situation led the artist Ivana Volaro to work on this piece, now showing at the prestigious Malba in the north of the city.
Este es un cartel que sería como una especie de cartel de parrilla argentina, o un cartel donde le puse menú, porque bueno, tiene que ver con eso, como cuando vas a una parrilla y están todas las comidas. Y bueno, es una lista de dólares. Vengo haciendo esta lista desde el 2014 más o menos. Y en el 2020 hice la primera versión en el cartel y esta es la cuarta versión.
In the context of inflation and a history of devaluations, Argentines who are able to save money do so in dollars.
Siempre pensamos como en dólares y no podemos pensar en pesos, pero nuestra economía es en pesos y lo que siempre intentamos hacer es tener una soberanía económica, ¿no? Y no depender de la idea del dólar, porque también es la idea del dólar, ¿no?
So Argentina is a country with triple-digit inflation, one that has a series of different values for the foreign exchange rate, and also one involved in ongoing negotiations with the International Monetary Fund, this over repayment of the $44 billion loan taken in 2018, the largest bailout ever given by the IMF. And yet there is economic activity, and some sectors are booming as the economic situation provides opportunity.
Nós sabemos a situação que está a Argentina e aproveitamos esse momento para conseguir usufruir mais, né, tanto da estadia, tanto dos produtos, da culinária, porque conseguimos ter poder de compra maior aqui.
This software engineer, along with his girlfriend, are just 2 tourists to visit from Brazil.
A inflação no Brasil gira em torno de 9% anual, então o salário mínimo infelizmente não consegue corresponder a essa inflação, mas comparado com a Argentina é muito pouco.
Tourists from neighbouring countries and around the world are flocking to Argentina to make the most of the skewed exchange rate.
Hay una diferencia muy grande, no solo en el servicio que brindan, sino que en el precio hay una diferencia de un 100% y a veces en algunos casos un 150% más en relación a Uruguay. O sea, un 2 por 1 y hay situaciones de un 3 por 1.
¿Tienen inflación en Uruguay?
Estamos hablando de un 7 a 9%, está controlada. Anual.
¿Y acá tenés al mes?
Al mes.
One question on many people's minds is where this situation ends and whether Argentina is destined for hyperinflation once again.
There are different types of measures to classify the hyperinflation, but I think we are nowhere there because we are talking of events of really high inflation. Like for example in Argentina, when we had a hyperinflation, it was 4,000 the increase in terms annually. So we need to have like 3 or 4 more devaluations, I think, to be just talking of origins of that. But I think we are nowhere near that.
This year, Argentina holds presidential elections. Primaries in mid-August will gauge the public mood ahead of October's first round of voting. And the key question on voters' minds is who, if anyone, can tackle the country's chronic rate of inflation.